Helldivers, you've most likely heard the news. A massive patch just dropped, and it comes with a metric ton of changes. Some good, some bad, some downright chaotic. As always, my name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and let's break it all down. First up, let's talk about the giant walker in the room. Two brand new enemy variants have been added to Helldivers 2, and while we all saw it coming, no one saw it coming, if you know what I mean. The Factory Strider is a massive automaton unit that not only acts as a mobile spawning platform for other automaton enemies, but it also has a top-mounted cannon and front-facing dual lasers that can absolutely wreck your day if you're not positioned correctly. These enemies were leaked a while back, and once again the team surprised everyone by simply dropping them into the game with absolutely no warning. The second new enemy variant is the Automaton Gunship, which deploys to the battlefield and then hovers over it, shooting down lasers and rockets until you either swat them out of the sky or get blown up. This patch just further proves that Arrowhead Games doesn't play by the same rules as other developers. They simply do what they want when they want, and quite frankly, that strategy is working and almost harkens back to the days where players didn't know everything about every aspect of the games that we were playing. With the new patch also came a bunch of documented changes, and I'm going to warn you now, this is an extensive list, so while I'd love to sit here and read off every line like every other content creator, I'm going to focus on some of the heavy hitters here, the changes I think will make the biggest impact on you. If you want to read the full list of patch notes, we've linked that in the description. I want to start with a number of weapon changes, because at the end of the day, everything comes down to how effective we are in the heat of battle. Let's first talk about the Arc Thrower, which has long been a quiet meta for a lot of players in this game. For starters, the weapon's charging inconsistencies have been changed, and it now will always take 1 second to charge a shot. It's also had its effective distance reduced from 50 meters to 35 meters. Finally, the weapon has had its stagger force increased. Then there's the Slugger, which quickly became a favorite weapon for many divers after the Breaker was nerfed a couple patches ago. Sadly, today's patch really takes away a lot of what players loved about this weapon. The Slugger's damage was reduced from 280 to 250. It also now has reduced stagger and demolition force. The team also fixed some inconsistencies with the Slugger in the user interface, so it should now appear with all of its proper tags. There was also a significant change to the JAR-5 Dominator, which is a semi-automatic weapon that you can unlock as part of the Steeled Veterans Warbond. Overall, its damage has been increased from 200 to 300, and now it has increased stagger. I will tell you guys point blank, I used this weapon post-patch, and I am loving it. It is perfect for the automaton front, and a weapon I think will be in main rotation, at least for me, for now. The truth is, I've tried to make this weapon work on a few different occasions, and now with the damage buff, I think it's actually going to be a solid contender as a primary weapon a lot of players like. I also wanted to point out a few other small weapon tweaks. First is the 30% damage increase to the Anti-Materiel rifle. This doesn't change its armor pen capabilities, which would be the real game changer, but this support weapon is very effective, even if the sight picture is still a bit messed up. The Diligence counter sniper's armor penetration has also been improved from light to medium, which should make it a bit more viable. The Breaker Incendiary has also seen a slight damage increase from 15 to 20 per bullet. This ties right into another major change. Fire damage per tick has also been increased by 50% from all sources. Not only does that mean things like the flamethrower and incendiary grenade, but also any sort of fire damage from enemies. Looking at you, Hulks. This has already sparked a ton of reaction online because the increase to fire damage does seemingly outpace the stim now, which means if you take any sort of fire damage, chances are you're gonna die. So that's not great. There are a few more weapon changes that you can check out, but nothing I think fundamentally changes the landscape of weapons in the game, so again, check out the patch notes. Patch 1.000.200 also introduces quite a few new or substantially changed features and systems that I think are worth talking about. First is the introduction of Blizzard and Sandstorm Planetary Hazards. Just like with the introduction of this system, planets have to be available for us to actively experience the hazard. And at the time of releasing this video, we've only seen the sandstorm effect, which greatly reduces visibility and slows us down. A rather shocking change was the tripling of the level cap up to 150, as well as the introduction of a slew of new titles to coincide with the increased scale. I'll admit I was just closing in on 50, so to now have to do that 3 times over is a bit daunting, but nevertheless, If you're in this game for the long haul, you recognize it's a marathon, not a sprint. The patch also changed up 2 key missions: retrieve essential personnel, everyone's favorite, and destroy command bunkers. Now, I find it pretty hilarious reading Reddit, realizing that a huge chunk of the community had never actually seen this mission, but there certainly seems to be plenty of you who have just never experienced this. The mission was incredibly easy and just required a few orbitals, and you could quickly get in and out of the mission in 5 minutes flat. Now, not so much. Destroy Command Bunker now has more objective locations and can now appear in operations from difficulty 5 and upward. As far as the Retrieve Essential Personnel mission is concerned, the team has moved the enemy spawn points further away from the objective to give players a fairer chance of defending the location. There will also be fewer civilians required to complete the mission on higher difficulties. It's also worth pointing out a massive change to one of the game's mission effects. The team has halved the negative effect of the Operation modifier that increases stratagem cooldowns or call-in times. This is easily one of the biggest changes in the patch and helps balance the scales when it comes to dealing with the automatons. Having those cooldown timers means more ways to deal with enemies and less time staring at your timers, hoping you had something to call in against the onslaught of robots looking to carve you open like a Thanksgiving turkey. This is a big deal if you play on the higher difficulties, and I don't want to undersell that. There were also a number of changes to enemies in patch 1.00.200, and all of them swing in the favor of the Helldivers, so let's take a look. Chargers' normal melee attacks will now deal less damage against exosuits. Frankly, this isn't that big of a deal as the charge is far more deadly and difficult to avoid. Bile spewers and nursing spewers do less damage with their puking, and all I can say here is thank goodness. While other players struggle with hunters, I, for whatever reason, have died to puke more than I care to admit. Shriekers can also no longer create bug breaches, which is kind of like, what? Who knew they could in the first place? And dead Shriekers will no longer be more lethal than a 500 kilogram bomb, and their ragdoll should no longer one-shot players. The only enemy change that swings the opposite direction against Helldivers is that Bile Titans can no longer be stunned, which is definitely an impactful change. Using stun grenades to lock these in place was amongst our favorite strategies for defeating them, but with the new support weapons like the Quasar Cannon in the game, this isn't the end of the world. Alright, so there's still a laundry list of changes that the team just categorized as Helldiver, so I'm going to try to explain these in the most cohesive way I can because again, there is a lot and it's a bit all over the place. First, let's talk about armor, because a huge change now makes medium and heavy armor way better. Medium armor players can expect about 5% less damage, and heavy armor players can expect about 10% less damage. The Exosuit continues to receive a number of changes as well. The Patriot Exosuit's rockets will now penetrate armor only on direct hits. Enemies will now also properly target the Exosuit. Previously, many enemies effectively ignored the Exosuit if a Helldiver on foot was available for them to target. And finally, players will no longer shoot their Exosuit weapons while having the minimap open. One of the more significant changes in the entire patch has to do with explosive damage. According to the developers, Helldivers and the Exosuit both had a bug that made them sometimes take explosive damage multiple times, making things like automaton rockets way too deadly. Raise your hand if you have ever been one-shot by a rocket devastator. If your hand is down, you are a dirty, rotten liar, and this one change is going to be huge on the bot front. It doesn't mean other issues like their insane ability to track and target players from across the map is any better, but it is definitely a step in the right direction. Sticking with automatons for a second, enemy constellations, which is the term they use to describe a group of enemies that preferred to spawn more of a certain devastator type, did not work as intended and are now functioning as they should. This means that sometimes when playing against the automatons, you will face more devastators instead of other enemy types. Hellpod steering has also been improved. There's a lot of words to describe what they did, but long story short, the system is fixed and they're going to keep monitoring it to make sure it's working as intended. Finally, let's talk about the ballistic shield, because rumor is it's actually viable now. The collision mesh of the shield has been slightly increased, which means it'll absorb a wider array of attacks, keeping your squishy Helldiver body protected more completely. The pose while carrying the shield has also been changed, which protects the Helldiver even better than before. There's also a change that corrects a bug where the Helldiver would become vulnerable while using the shield in first person. That is a metric ton of meaningful changes, from new enemies to weapon balancing to a number of bug fixes and balance tweaks that will no doubt be felt when dropping into a mission. It's crazy to think this is still not the first major content update, but with every iteration, so long as they don't break their servers and systems, the game continues to move in new directions as Arrowhead continues to roll out content. Keep in mind, Helldivers 2 is a live service game, which means there's a ton of new content constantly in the works, and our team will be there with you every step of the way. So if you like our content and you want more of these types of videos, hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.